I would like to introduce our first speakers. They're a power couple of Grihastha family that preach the mission of Srila Gurudev. They are always in front line to serve the Vaishnavas. Both have served Srila Gurudev very beautifully and are still serving Srila Gurudev very beautifully. The first speaker, I think is Ananga Mohan Prabhu, has spent time with Srila Vama Maharaji and Srila Gurudev personally. So we're going to hear from him first, and then we'll hear from Srimati Yamuna Didi straight after, in glorifying Srila Gurudev as well. So welcome to the stage and Dandavat Pranams.
Dandavat Didi, Dandavat to all the assembled devotees, and thank you for inviting us. I hope you can hear us okay. And if you can't, just please shout out.
Could be a bit better, actually. It's a bit echoey.
What can I do about that?
When you come closer, it's better.
Okay, all right.
Much better.
Okay. Thank you again for inviting us. Very privileged to be in the Assembly of Vaishnavas and encouraging us to speak something about Sri Guru, which should be a natural and spontaneous thing, but through my anarthas, it's hesitation and almost what to say. There's so many things to say, but I'd like to share with you today my experience with Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj. I'd like to offer my unlimited Dandavat Pranams into his lotus feet and to the lotus feet of my Diksha Guru, Vaishnava Mishtapadas, the Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj, and the blessings of Sripad Bhaktivedanta Bhavan Maharaj and all the assembled Vaishnavas. I started off my spiritual journey within ISKCON through over many years, and in meeting them at the local Hindu temple, and then meeting a book distributor on the streets in Leicester who invited me to the temple. And from that point, I started doing service and then went to the manor and started associating with devotees more, and took shelter of one ISKCON sannyasi whom I served for a few years, who actually introduced me to Srila Gurudev, Srila Narayana Goswami Maharaj, and who, like many ISKCON sannyasis, they went to see him and took instructions from him. And little did I know who he was. They didn't tell me, and I didn't ask and inquire about him. But this is a familiar story, which most of you know of. But some years later, I was fortunate enough to go and visit Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj. And my first impressions of him were like that he was a golden mountain, a very grave and still mountain that was full of emotions and always stirring inside, but externally very quiet and very still. So, like they say, still waters run deep, and he ran very, very deep in his whole persona. There was a natural effulgence about him, and I can't forget him, as many of you who've seen him, who've had the good fortune of seeing him, that he sat on his bed most of the time cross-legged, and he had a bolster pillow on his lap, and with a sign saying, please do not touch feet, in broken English. And it was, he was very simple. His room was immaculately clean, like himself. It was very simple, and usually had a bookshelf behind him with many books. And we know of his qualities of being like an encyclopedia of verses, knowledge, and references. If anybody needed anything, they would just have to go to him and ask, and he would know. We heard a few weeks ago Bhaktivedanta Bhavan Maharaj glorifying him, saying that if he was to recite verses, he could do so for 7 days and 7 nights continuously. This was just I think the tip of the iceberg of his wealth of knowledge. But not only that, but his etiquette was also glorified by our acharyas. And he was so particular about Vaishnava Prad. He was always fearful of making Vaishnava Prad, and he never commented or listened to any Vaishnava Prad. If anybody came to him to complain, or anybody else, he would just say Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And if they persisted Hare Krishna even loudly, and I think the person who came to complain would very quickly get the message that this person wasn't going to listen to him. He would often send those people to Srila Gurudeva, Srila Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, and seeing who he was, I think they would just turn back and go back to wherever they came from and resolve their criticism or complaint in another way. So this is just a small snippet of Srila Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj. He sat very upright on his bed. He's never slouched forward. He always had his finger in his japa bag when he was chanting. He always made a point that pointing his finger out very sternly and straight out of his bead bag in chanting, showing us that this ego finger should be nowhere near our hearts, our soul. So in this way, he taught us by his presence. We just had to sit in front of him, and you could feel a great peace. You could feel great connection with him, and just feel happy and content. So most of the time when I saw him, he was tearful, and he would just carry a handkerchief or wipe his eyes quite often with his uttariya, with his cloth. And we've all seen, I always saw that his eyes, around his eyes were always dark, and he was always in this mood of deep meditation. He always had a mosquito net on his four-post, a simple four-post bed, I remember, and he's always had one or two attendants outside his room. And this was interesting because they would often go into his room and see if he needed anything. I had the good fortune of spending some time with his cooks, with his servants. I remember Prem Pradeep Prabhu. I remember Priyatpati Maharaj. They are still serving his Vigraha, his Samadhi place in Navadvip Dham at Sri Devanand Gaudiya Math, where he spent a lot of his time. They're still serving his Vigraha there, and I offer my obeisances to them. I offer my obeisances to Madhav Prabhu, who is his servant at that time. I offer my obeisances to Ananga Mohan Prabhu, who was his personal servant at that time, who helped us to come close to Srila Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj. We were very fortunate when we met him that he installed our deities, Sri Radha, Gopinath, and Mahaprabhu. And if you see this video of him installing the deities, I think it's the only one. You can catch it on YouTube. It's of our deities, and we're very privileged that he did that, and I think maybe the first time that it's ever been recorded. So he spoke to us in Hindi and in English, and many people questioned whether he could speak English, but he kept this very quiet. But with us, he was very fluently spoke English, and he recited, I remember, one verse of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and there's one line I remember, I should find it out. He said, "Go forth marching souls," as if to instruct us as jivas, souls, to carry on in the battle against Maya, against our trials and tribulations, to march on this path of bhakti. And he really, I always remember that verse when we become disheartened, like Srila Gurudeva used to say, don't become hopeless. I remember Srila Bhaktivedanta Maharaj's instructions to carry on marching forth. And this gives a great inspiration. So he asked me what I did, and I said I was an art teacher at that time, and he listened very carefully. Then some days later, through his servants, they asked me to draw a portrait of him. So we went out. I didn't have my materials with me. We went out into the local market, bought a sketchbook, bought some graphite pencils, and I was very, very fortunate that his servant, Madhav Prabhu, he took me into his room early in the morning when Srila Gurudeva Bhaktivedanta Vaman Maharaj was doing his anik. and it took him about 20 to 30 minutes to do his anik. And at that time, I went into the room with the servant and sat in front of Srila Bhaktivedanta Bhavan Maharaj, and I drew his portrait when he was doing his anik. And I always remember this picture of him, a pencil sketch that I've still kept, and it's still in the same sketchbook. And I've not drawn any other picture in that sketchbook apart from his portrait. So I kept it as a memory of him. And it was my privilege, I think, to have been there that time and place to receive his mercy in that way. He was very generous to us. He was very kind. We had the young family with us, and so he said, take them out to go and see the zoo in Calcutta. We were at Shambhazar Gaudiya Math there, and he said he'd sent one servant with him, with us, to show us all the different sites in Calcutta, to do some sightseeing. So we went to the zoo in Calcutta, we went to Science City, and then a couple of days later, we were taken to all the different tirthas in Mayapur, and the samadhis and all the ashrams there. And I remember that the servant that was with us, our guide, he wouldn't go into the Chandrodaya Mandir, Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj's temple, because out of hesitation, I think we went in and we invited him to come in, but he wouldn't go inside there. So I think this is a little bit telling of what he knew. So I respected that very much. Our kids, all of my children took mantras from Srila Bhaktivedanta Bhavan Goswami Maharaj, and they were very fortunate to receive. Narottam, the eldest, received Diksha mantras. Radhika received Diksha mantras from him. And my youngest, I saw that he was very upset because the other two were getting Diksha mantras and he wasn't getting anything. So he was very upset and was crying. So I asked if he could have some mantras as well. And Srila Bhaktivedanta Bhavan Maharaj, he gave him the Nrsimha mantra. And then I thought, well, if these young children are getting something, why don't I also ask for something from him personally? So I also asked for Nrsimha mantras from him, which he gave very kindly. And we know that he was very closely connected with Lord Nrsimhadev. And there are many stories of that and pastimes of that also. He was very famous also for being in touch with ghosts and ghost stories and marrying ghosts and liberating ghosts, and a very powerful personality. We gave him a donation, I remember, and then a day or two later, or almost straight away, he sent out a servant to go and get the whole set of Chaitanya Charitamrita for us in the original Bengali text, which he was going to present to us. But before he did, he took every book and he started to sign each one individually, personally, for us. But then his servant saw that it's going to take him a long time to do the rest of them. So I think after 3, he stopped him. So we have some very nice memorabilia of his gifts to us, which are very close to our hearts. So we invited him to come to the West, like our Srila Gurudeva Narayana Goswami Maharaj. But he said, now that I'm in my old age, it is better that I stay in India. This is where I belong, he said. I remember him saying that. We sent him, during his later years, we sent him medicine from here. And we were very happy to be able to be engaged in that service for him. We know him also, and Srila Gurudeva describes him like that, as a Brahma. Brahmaji was the creator, is the creator of our material world. But in terms of our devotees, Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Maharaj, he gave Diksha to all of those people who came to surrender to him. But before he did, he would always tell those prospective disciples to go and take permission or get the blessings from Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj. And this was his great humility that we can see in him, that he didn't think that these were my disciples, and never at any point, as Guru should do, not think that these are my disciples. He was very humble in this way. And then we know that Srila Narayana Maharaj, he's compared to Vishnu because he maintained all of those disciples, and he looked after them and nurtured them and maintained them. And this is his glories. And we know that also Trika Maharaj, he was compared to Mahesh Lord Shiva, the destroyer, destroying our anathas. So in this way, we have all the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh in our sampradaya, which is a great strength. So we pray to them that we get their blessings. So Srila Bhaktivedanta Maharaj was very independent. Srila Gurudeva describes, whenever he wanted to, he would just leave a place in the middle of the night without telling anyone, and he would go off either on his preaching or have darshan of a particular tirtha. And Srila Gurudeva remembers is that many times they would come down in the morning for Mangalarti and he wasn't there, and they find out that he's somewhere halfway across the country on a train somewhere with his servant. So it's very, very interesting. He was very humble, particularly on his Vyas Puja days. If he was invited somewhere, if he was present somewhere in his Vyas Puja, I don't know if this happened all the time, but the night before he would disappear, he would go somewhere, and people would be waiting for him to perform the Vyas Puja, and he was nowhere to be seen. So he just didn't want any honor or praise given to him at all. He's a very amazing person. When I remember sitting in his classes, I don't know Bengali, but when I sat in his classes, I could understand what he was saying. His Bengali was like he was speaking English to me. It was just clear what he was trying to say. So his character is spotless. His writing was also like pearls. It was described like Rupa Goswami's. And this way he wrote many articles for our Param Gurudev, and they never had to be edited. And he was such a great personality. We know that story when he got his arms pressed in the printing machine, and that when Param Gurudev found out, he cried, and he was so upset. And Srila Gurudev was telling this story that he hardly see Param Gurudev with tears in his eyes, but when he saw that Santosh at that time, Santosh or Sergeant Sevak Brahmacharis had this accident. He rushed him very quickly to hospital and took full care of him. We know we're so blessed to have Srila Vaman Maharaj or to have met him, to know him, because he was from a very young age with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada from the age of 9 and 10 all the way through. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he surrendered him to, or gave him over to Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj to look after and take care of. And to meet somebody who is directly in touch with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada is such a blessing that we're so fortunate to have that. So I pray today that we continue to get all the Vaishnava's blessings, and to have his blessings also, which I know they're always showering upon us. And I pray that we always are able to honor those blessings. Thank you very much for allowing us to speak today. I'd like to offer my obeisances. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyo patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you very much. Hope sometime I'll get the opportunity to speak on Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj also, and look forward to sharing that with you all soon.
That was absolutely beautiful. And I didn't realize that I didn't realize that you're an art teacher, number one, and number two, to be able to go into a room where someone of the caliber of Srila Vama Maharaj is doing anik, and to be able to draw, that must have been like the best feeling in the whole entire world. That must have been like crazy.
Yeah, it was very privileged. I showed him the drawing afterwards, and he looked at it, for a few minutes, and it was just like a blank face, like but he smiled at the end of it and gave me back the drawing, and that's the only feedback that I I got from it. It was a very light pencil drawing, a very quick sketch.
If you ever have it lying around, please send us it so we can all look at it as well.
I also have Srila Bhakti. I'd like to tell you that story later, but very briefly, that I have Srila Bhakti and the Narayana Maharaj's original footprints as well, which I share with when he came to our house in '96. I got him to stand on a piece of clay because I was working with ceramics at that time, and so I was able to make his footprints as the.
Wow. So we're all going to come to you to go and get a footprint painting of Srila Gurudeva's lotus feet. We're coming to your house. Anyone that needs to know, he lives in Brighton. In the seafront. That's amazing. You should have done the property. Do you want to?
Yeah, that's wonderful, Prabhu. Before we move on to Yamuna, it's quite rare that we get devotees who have much personal experience of Srila Vaman Maharaj. Can you just say something? I know we're running a bit behind time, so only a short thing, but something about his relationships with people like that we really revere and respect, like Madhav Maharaj and Bon Maharaj and Uma Didi. Just something about his relationships.
This is the spiritual aspect of relationships between devotees on that level. It's not based on physical presence. And it's based on either following the instructions or it's based on their faith in their spirit, in that personality. And that really connects them. And they are always connected. And they will always be connected with that strong faith. And following their instructions, they will live forever. And the disciple lives forever with that personality. And so we find that even with the dedication we see with Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj's disciples to him, and we see that with our disciples, Madhav Maharaj, Bon Maharaj, Siddhanta Maharaj, Sridhar Maharaj, and all the Maharajas who've had association with him. So we're very blessed to have had that association.
Thank you.